Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. Like I always say, thank you so much for tuning in and for your support. It has been overwhelmingly great. I love you guys, and I wish I could, give each one of you a hug and just tell you thank you. So just know that I really do appreciate it. I'd love to give a shout out to our sponsors, Siegfried and Jensen, Wasatch Recovery, iHeal Institute, Veracity Networks, and Living Recovery's Interventions. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for supporting me, and it's an honor to have you guys as part of the team. And today's going to be a great day. We have a guest. I typically, this is probably one of the, not the youngest, but I've had some really young people on here, but you're probably close to one of the youngest. You are, your name is Smith Alley. Right, which is we were talking about this earlier. It's what a cool name.
Yeah. It's definitely unique.
Yeah. And you are currently a senior at Bountiful High School.
Mm-hmm.
How old are you? 17?
I'm 18. I just barely turned 18.
Just turned 18.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're doing some great things, by the way, and at such a young age, which is really cool. But you've also had some really tough struggles. So I'm gonna give a little background on Smith. Like we said, he's 18 years old. He goes to Bountiful High School. He's a senior. When he was younger, he was exposed to pornography, and he struggled with it for 5 years, as well as the harmful effects that social media had on his mental health, which we're going to get into. He's got an amazing story. But because of those struggles, he decided to change the course of his life, and he fell in love with helping other people, and he started a company called Protect. Is that how you say it?
Protect Strong, yeah.
Protect Strong. And that way you can try to reach as many people as you can. And correct me if I'm wrong too, if it's a company where you'll go into someone's home and actually counsel them and show them certain ways that they can do to help protect their family. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I saw a huge gap where my parents' generation, they grew up not knowing what the digital world and the digital era was, and now they are the only parenting generation that will have to parent kids who know only the digital era.
Right.
And so I started by doing these in-home consultations. We're now working to go virtual just so we can reach more people.
Right.
And so I recorded a virtual workshop with Colin Karchner, who was big here, but
the late Colin Karchner,
before he passed away.
Yeah.
So it's now going more virtual, and then I also recently founded a nonprofit called the Live Life Bigger Foundation.
Yeah, and that's cool. And you do your own podcast, and you're doing all these great things as such a young kid, and I love it, and I'm really impressed with the way you live your life. What I'd like to start off is just tell us a little bit about, again, I know you're still young, but tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up.
Yeah, so I was born in Salt Lake City, lived in Bountiful my whole life. Mm-hmm. I have 3 sisters, so I say I'm on Team Estrogen, and I thought about making T-shirts. So
you should, yeah.
I have 2 older sisters and 1 younger. My 2 older sisters are married now. One has a daughter, so I have the most adorable 9-month-old niece ever.
That's awesome.
And then I have a little sister who's my best friend, and we like to spend time together. Amazing parents. My dad was in the Army when he was younger, and then he went through addiction with, being an alcoholic and substance abuse, and then got into the Army, cleaned up, met my mom. My mom's name is Sally Alley, so that's not a joke. Sally Alley. So we definitely have some unique names in the family. Yeah. Grew up in Bountiful, fairly regular childhood. I'm a Christian, go to church. Mm-hmm. Went to school, always been a pretty good student, get good grades, play sports. So I'd say your regular childhood.
Yeah. You obviously come across as a very confident person right now. And, the stuff that I've looked up on you, you're very confident. Have you always been that kind of a kid where you're just kind of a go-getter, confident kid?
Yeah, I've definitely always been charismatic, and I've always been good at talking to adults. When I was little, my parents, like by the time we were 6, they'd make us order our own food at restaurants. And my mom and my dad, they're both foodies, and so we loved like Thai restaurants and Mexican restaurants, and we eat everywhere, like Ethiopian food. We love Ethiopian food, and so we'd go to these restaurants, and I'm just some little 5-6-year-old kid ordering for myself, and the waiters all confused. So yeah, I've always been pretty confident. I think, of course, like most people, I've always had doubt, and I think especially in my childhood, I was really good at masking my confidence and putting up fake confidence. But I have always been able like to talk really easily to people, and you know, that charisma. So
yeah, well, and I think that's kind of rare, and I don't mean that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, you know, kids nowadays are so ingrained in their social media that I think they have a hard time actually talking and communicating. Do you see that at all with what you've been? You know? Yeah,
I mean, social media has had a huge effect on our and my generation, and especially with the combination of the COVID lockdown and social media, it's having a huge effect. In fact, I was just in Cedar City yesterday. I presented 6 times in 24 hours to over 3,500 people, and
I love it.
I was talking to the middle school, and so I usually do this thing because there was a study by Dr. Christy Kane that says that humans need 8 hugs that last 8 seconds a day for
Colin kind of
it was kind of Colin's thing, and so you need that for mental and emotional survival. And I was at this middle school, and usually during my presentation I have everybody stand up and give their friend an 8-second hug, but the principal was like, we're gonna ask you to cut that out, because with the COVID lockdown, these 4th graders that, you know, they're in 4th grade and they get shut down. So they're doing 4th grade from home, 5th grade completely in masks, and then they go to a new school in 6th grade. And, you know, they're on that whole time. They're just consumed in social media because they're at home. They don't have anything else to do.
Well, so much downtime.
That sexualized content, like they're 6th graders, they're having a huge problem with like inappropriate touching and stuff like that. So I think it's had a huge effect on that. I think it has a huge effect on like kids get so used to hiding behind a screen that when they're face to face with someone, they don't know what to do. And so there's definitely been some big effects like that.
Well, you're obviously very well versed on this, and I can't wait to get more into that. But you also, I mean, I think the reason why you are so passionate about helping others, which we mentioned, is you've had your own struggles. Mm-hmm. You know, you struggled with pornography for 5 years. Obviously, social media had a very strong, maybe negative impact on your own mental health. Yeah. So let's talk about it. Share your story with us. Tell us kind of what happened and maybe what you went through and how you got past it and why you're doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, grew up fairly normal family. I've always been a good student. So me and my siblings, we went to a charter school called Wasatch Academy in North Salt Lake. And so grew up going to that charter school, and I like to talk about it and relate it to paper cuts. So not all of us have had a broken bone, not all of us have had stitches, but we all get paper cuts, right? Yeah. And so my very first paper cut happened in 1st grade. The first day of 1st grade, I walk in and I'm feeling confident, and as far as I can remember, like kindergarten was good. Yeah, right. And like in kindergarten there was this girl that I liked and she liked me, and so like we went to the zoo one time in kindergarten. So like as far as I can remember, I love school. Yeah, right. And so I go into the first day of 1st grade, and my teacher's name is Miss Rooney, and I walk in and I'm at the yellow table with my friend Jackson, who I grew up with. So already like good seating chart, and this other girl named Ellie. And class starts and Miss Rooney says that we're going to introduce ourselves one by one. And so people start standing up and just saying their name. Yeah. And it comes to be my turn, and I get a little nervous and my legs start to shake a little bit. And I had a stutter when I was little. Okay. And so I go, hi, my name's Smith. Oh. And I'm like super angry, and I'm like, dang it, that was the one chance that I had to impress all of these people. And so I sit down, and a girl from the red table turns around and says, why can't you talk right? And that was the very first day that I got my very first paper cut. Yeah. And so these are like paper cuts that we get on our hearts, not on our fingers. And I vividly remember, like, over the years, I received a lot of those paper cuts. And when you don't heal from those, and when you don't deal with those, when you don't put a Band-Aid on, then you have a wound that just keeps on bleeding. And so that happened, and that day I kind of bought into the core belief that I wasn't enough, and I was never going to be enough to make my parents proud, and I was never going to be enough to have good friends that cared about me, and that I wasn't worthy of love, and that I was just kind of subpar to everybody else.
Right.
And so life went on. I put on this, like I said, I was a great actor, and I put up this facade that I was okay when inside I felt like a fraud in my own skin. And so then when I was 9 years old, I got exposed to pornography because my parents had gotten me this Android tablet for Christmas. And by the way, like a little backstory, my parents were kind of the know-all in the neighborhood for these kind of things. And like other moms would come to my mom to talk about what they should do with their technology. And my mom thought she had all of her bases covered, which again was my inspiration for starting this company, because as a kid who spent 5 years getting around all of those things, I call myself a little tech ninja. I've now reversed that to help other parents keep their kids safe. But
love that.
I get exposed to pornography, and we had my parents were like fairly proactive with all of this. We had all the conversations. And so I'm thinking back to these conversations and remembering what they had told me. And they're like, okay, when you get exposed to pornography, turn it off and tell an adult. Turn it off and tell an adult. So I'm thinking about that, and I turn it off, and immediately I think back to that day in first grade when I felt like I wasn't enough, and I didn't want to disappoint my parents. And even though it wasn't my fault, I was just on the internet, clicked on something, I didn't know what it was, and I was exposed to pornography. Even though it wasn't my fault, I still felt like they'd look at me differently. I still felt like I'd disappoint them. And so, I
was going to say, I think that's pretty common where, kids come across it on accident, like just very innocently, but there's this feeling of shame around it all of a sudden. Like, oh, I didn't mean to, and then you do. I think I've heard this a lot from kids that I've worked with, and they'll say exactly what you just said. They started feeling like that shame again, or in other words, I'm not good enough. Yeah. And that's one of my big motivations for doing this is if you can prevent innocent exposures, you can prevent, a majority of cases and of kids that go down that path. Yeah. And so anyway, life goes on, and about 6 months to a year later, it creeps back into my life as a fix to everything that I was feeling and dealing with. And it just became my drug. And then I got social media when I was 10 and a half. And I get on there and I'm comparing my life, which felt very boring, to everybody else's highlights of them on vacation. Even and hanging out 10. With friends. Yeah. And wow. So then there's that. And then there's the fact that, I get on and I see these guys with washboard abs, and that wasn't me. I was a little chubby kid. So I just started to hate the situation I was in. I started to hate my body. And you're 10.
Yeah.
I want my listeners to hear, he's 10 years old. He's looking at social media, and you're having these thoughts of you didn't like who you were. And
this is, this is very common nowadays. And that's what, what parents don't realize, no parent wraps up a new iPhone under the tree for Christmas and says, I really hope that my daughter develops an eating disorder because of this. Yeah. Or I really hope that my son becomes depressed because of this. Like, no parent thinks that, but that's what you're doing. And in fact, just recently, there was a 10-year-old girl in my community who took her life. She was 10 years old. Wow. And I was talking to my mom about this, and my mom was like, I didn't even know what suicide was when I was 10. And that's what my mom was saying, like, this older generation, you weren't thinking about those things because you didn't have access to the whole world in your pocket.
You didn't know that. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when I was 10, I'm out throwing a tennis ball against the garage door. Yeah. That's all I knew. You know what I mean? Yeah. Wow.
So that happens. I begin to have kind of that spiral of those thoughts, just hating myself, continuing to numb out, not only with pornography, but with social media and with video games, and just everything I do, everything I did day to day was to not feel. And I spent about 4 to 5 years feeling like that.
Real quick, how much time do you think you were spending on social media on a daily basis back then?
I was probably spending 2.5 hours on social media, and then another 3.5 to 4 on video games.
Wow.
And so, and again, like, my parents were proactive, so they tried to limit that stuff. And also, like, again, I was a good student, so I was a good student because I was trying to put up the mask, and because if my parents, like, saw that I was doing well in school, then they'd kind of get off my back. So I'd wake up in the morning, get on social media, watch porn before I went to school, go to school, come home, watch porn, do my homework so that my mom didn't get mad at me, then play video games and get on social media a little bit, have dinner with my family, leave the dinner table early to watch porn, play video games, go to bed. And it like, I vividly remember, I can't remember a time of just like having a prominent feeling. You know, when you think back on your life and you can pick a time where like, oh, I felt happy in that time, or I felt sad in that time. I didn't have either. It was just kind of all numb. And so, you know, life keeps going like that. And like I said, growing up as a Christian, I felt like because of what I was involved with, I was going to go to hell. And in 8th grade, I decided if I'm going to go to hell, I might as well make it quick. So in 8th grade, in my shop class, I decided I was going to kill myself.
Really?
And then, actually, someone you probably know, Rob Eastman, he came to my 8th grade health class. And with him and with a foundation called Fight the New Drug, I decided that
Clay Olson.
I love Clay.
Clay's the best.
And so I decided that my life was worth living. I decided that if Rob could do it, I could do it too. Fight the New Drug helped me realize that I wasn't a bad kid. I was a good kid wrapped up in bad stuff. And then, you know, I decided my life was worth living, but I kind of stuck with my old ways. And, you know, still end of 8th grade, 14 years old, found myself severely depressed and dealing with anxiety, still consuming a stupid amount of porn. And I kept putting on these masks, and there were signs that I wasn't okay, but they were very small. And I was really good at faking who I was. I was really good at, you know, putting on that smile. And then on April 23rd, 2018, well, before that, I'd gotten into a lot of trouble. And on April 23rd, 2018, my parents checked me out of school, and I'd gotten into a little bit of trouble with the law. And that day was just a blow-up day.
Yeah.
And it was like I told you, my dad was in the Army, so he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
Very first day I saw him cry. And that night my mom comes down to me and she grabs my face and she says, "Smith, I will fight for you, but you have to fight for yourself first." And so it was that moment where I decided that no matter what my past had been, I was going to become the person that I wanted to be, that the path that I was on before wouldn't define me, that I would trek up a mountain to change where I was going. So
based on your mom grabbing you and saying that. Yeah,
just realizing that, you know, it was so genuine, and I could really see that, like, she was ready to do anything for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and again, Clay with Fight the New Drug, and then Rob with what he does. I mean, they're both amazing people, and it's great that their programs and what they do had that impact on you in 8th grade, where you're like, you know what, my life's worth living, and I'm not a bad person because I've struggled with this. Yeah. I think that's a good message for everyone listening right now. Like, if you're struggling with this, doesn't mean you're a bad person, right?
Yeah. I think everything that we as humans are just neutral, and I think we err on the side. We're good people. We all have good intentions. We all want the best for people. Yeah. Mostly. But we all struggle with things. And so, like, doing something bad doesn't make you a bad person. And I like to think about it, especially now, like, I always ask myself, did I take a step forward or a step back? And it's okay to take a step back as long as I'm facing forward, and deciding, like, where I want to go. Right. And it's okay to take a step back if you're facing forward. It's not okay to be facing backwards. And so that's what I've decided is, like, the only thing that matters is the desires of my heart. It's my intention. And that's what I've tried to focus on.
Wow. Very well said, Smith. So you have this moment with your mom. She grabs you and said, "You better fight for yourself. I'll fight for you, but you need to as well." Mm-hmm. And that's when you kind of decided, I'm going to be the person I know I can be and should be. So talk about that. What did you start doing, and what helped you kind of get past this pornography issue? And then maybe also touch base on, like, the maybe how social media really affected your mental health.
Right. Yeah, so that day I handed my parents, in fact, this again goes to show how proactive my parents were. They thought if we only had an iPod and they could have filters on the Wi-Fi that we were on, that it would keep us safe. So I handed them my iPod, and I was like, I don't want this anymore. I got a slide phone, and so I started to use that.
I love it.
I joined a recovery group.
Okay.
Got a therapist, just started talking about my mental health.
Uh-huh.
And, started when I was taking out these bad habits that I'd fell into, I just started replacing them with good habits. I started this journaling technique called Manpower, just trying to better myself. But most importantly, it was like, especially with how deep I felt like I had gone, it was like a life or death fight for me. And it was like, this is either going to take everything that I've ever wanted, and I'm going to end up in prison or dead if I don't solve this, or I'm going to become the person who I want to be. And so I was just kind of like all in. And I remembered like that summer especially, I was working at Chick-fil-A. I'd gotten a job at 14 downtown in City Creek, and I was working like 50 to 60 hours a week as a 14-year-old.
Dang, yeah.
Like just putting a ton of hours in there, and I'd come home and I'd like feel that temptation, that urge to, you're stressed and to go back. And I was just like a machine. It was like I'd drop down and I'd do 50 push-ups right there. And then I'd like go on a huge run. And then even some nights I'd get that same temptation, that same urge. And I'd go and into my parents' room, and it's like 12:30 at night. And I'd be like, I just need to sit here. Like, go ahead and go to sleep. I just need to sit here in a room with someone else. And I'd sit up awake for 2 to 3 hours until 3 or 4 in the morning, just so that I could fight those things. And so it became just like this huge battle for me. And then it was all worth it, and it all paid off when I started helping people. And it was just small at first. I went to a summer camp the summer before my 10th grade. And I decided before I left, I was like, I'm going to share my story. I'm going to share my story this week, because people need it, and kids my age, they're going through the same thing, and I know that, and so I'm going to share my story. And so I get to the summer camp, and I'd gone with my friend Jackson, who I told you about. He was the same guy in first grade. Yeah. So I've grown up with him, and we go to this summer camp, and that night with the other four boys that we were dorming with, I just talked about my story. And this kid named Landon, he comes up and he just starts crying because he had tried to take his life 2 weeks before. He'd been struggling with pornography. And so I spent about 2 hours helping him lock down his phone. And we started hanging out every week after summer camp. I'd drive an hour, or he'd drive an hour to get to me.
Wow.
And like just as I had done, where I had kind of rebuilt my life and it had become a full-on battle for me, he did the same thing. And as I watched him do that, like, it filled my heart, and I loved it, and I loved that feeling. And so I kept doing it, like with my lacrosse team. As a freshman, I played for Woods Cross High School.
Okay.
And they were not the best team, and so I was starting varsity as a freshman. And so I had a little bit of credit on the team. And one day at practice, I'm just talking about my recovery group, and one of the juniors, he was like the best player on the team, comes up to me and he says, I don't know if what you're talking about is real, but if it is, I want in. And so one day after one of our games, like 5 of my teammates came with me to my recovery group.
Really?
And it was just the same thing. Like, I saw them regain everything that they had lost, and it made me feel good that I'd helped them do that.
Wow. Well, again, so now you're sharing your story, which again takes a lot of confidence, a lot of vulnerability on your part, because back when I was growing up, and even recently, talking about pornography was like, you don't talk about it. It's one of those things that you just keep under the wraps. Yeah. But for a kid as young as you, talking about it with your peers around you, I mean, were you ever worried that people might look at you differently or judge you? Or was that like you didn't care? You're like, you know what? I don't care. I'm sharing.
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I was like scared to death, especially when my parents found out about all this stuff. I like asked them to kind of keep it under the radar, especially with my sisters, because I wanted to, before I told them, like, I wanted to be somewhere on the path. Like, I wanted to be on the come up. And so it took me about a month and a half to tell my oldest sister, and then 3 months to tell my other sister, and probably 5 to 6 months to tell my littlest sister.
Oh, okay.
And so I was always really scared. And then, about a year later when I started talking about and talking to these other kids, like, it was all really scary. But I just decided, especially believing in God and believing in Satan even.
Yeah.
I believe that Satan wants us to be alone, and he wants us to be isolated. And so if I did that, and if I didn't share, like, the battle was won.
Right.
And so I kind of got to the point where I'm like, I don't care. Every kid's dealing with this, Over 90% of boys 13 to 18 are viewing pornography consistently. And so I just decided that I'd start sharing, and then I just love sharing, and I never had a bad experience with it. I never shared my story with someone and they were like disgusted by me, And because everybody's struggling with something.
Yeah.
And then by that point, and now it's just like, it's amazing that I took a struggle that I had when I was younger, and this is something that when I was 13, 14 years old, there is no amount of money that I wouldn't have paid to keep it a secret, right?
Yeah, right.
But now everybody wants to hear it.
Yeah.
And, people go to great lengths to hear the story. So I think once I realized that, first of all, most of the time, I'm not going to be judged because of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be looked at as less because of it. And second of all, like, if someone does, that's their loss, because I'm on my own journey.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to add to what I'm doing, and if you're not going to, fight and battle with me against the evils of the world, okay,
Right. Well, again, you're very well spoken. You're very confident. I love it, and I love how you're. And I would also say you're very mature.
Thank you.
The way you're looking at things, and again, that says a lot about you. And now I know why so many people just love you.
Thank you.
So you do this, you change your life, you're sharing your story, and obviously you want to take it to another level, right?
Yeah.
So you created this company and this foundation or whatever. Let's talk about that and tell us, what about those things.
So, I mean, even before that, when I was 16, or when I was coming up on 16, my parents said, if you want to get your driver's license, you have to be an Eagle Scout. And so I'm like, and I told them this, I'm like, I don't want to paint a bench. I don't want to go plant trees. That's not something I'm passionate about. I want to do something I'm passionate about. And so they were like, okay, then you can drive when you're 18. And so I'm like, okay, I have to figure out a way to get this Eagle Scout done so that I can drive. But I want it to be something that I love. And so November 2019, I put together a fireside for my community talking about the harmful effects of social media and pornography. And I got my therapist to come and speak alongside me.
Really?
And a funny story, like, my dad beforehand, he didn't want me to be disappointed, of course, with how many people came. So he's like, hey, buddy, like, let's just set our expectations. And he's like, I don't know if more than 50 people will come. So let's just, like, set our expectations. And I looked at him and I said, I will bet you lunch right now that over 200 people come. And so we're like having this bet, and the night begins, and my dad's sitting at the door counting the people coming in, and over 250 people showed up that night.
On.
And so I speak and I share my story with all these people for about 16 minutes is how long I spoke. And then my therapist stands up and speaks. And after that, one of the people that attended must have told someone that they knew, and a group called Citizens for Decency, which is a group out of Idaho, contacted me, and they wanted me to be involved with an assembly that they were doing for Snake River High School, I think it was. And so I'm preparing for that, and then COVID happens and everything, goes down the toilet. And throughout this whole time, I was working at Chick-fil-A. I worked there for 2.5 years. When I was 16, they made me a manager there, so I'm working.
At 16, that's cool.
Yeah, so then I get to this point where COVID shuts everything down, and again, I've always been a pretty hard worker, and I'm working, 12-hour shifts every single day with the masks on, and I just kind of get fed up with it. And I've always loved business, and I've always, kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to start a company, but do something that I was, again, passionate about and something that could help people. And so I started this company. I quit my job at Chick-fil-A, and I started this company called Protect Strong, partnered with a few softwares, and just started going into people's homes, helping them set this stuff up, having a conversation with the family about media guidelines and stuff like that, how to have a healthy relationship with social media and technology, because obviously it's not going away, so we have to figure out how to live with it.
Yeah, right.
And so I started doing that, and it's going a little bit slow, but still working on it. Start making some good money, and then, my mom and I had followed Colin Karchner for a long time, and so I reached out to him, and I was just like, hey, this is my story, this is where I've been, and this is what I'm trying to do so I can help people. And I don't know how you can help me, but I know that you can help me. Yeah. And so he's like, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? And so I go down, and I'm on his podcast. And
that's awesome.
When I met him, it was like an instant connection, and it was like an instant brotherhood, and it just felt so easy and so electric with him. And so we do this podcast, and he's like, I want you to come speak with me. And so I start following him around. He'd do a fireside or a conference, and he'd speak for 45 minutes, and I'd speak for 5.
But still, you're with him, which is great.
Yeah, and I'm learning from him, and, he's kind of offering me that mentorship. And then we recorded this video workshop together, and things start going and picking up, and I start traveling and doing consultations, go to Reno, go to San Diego, doing these consultations and speaking, and then Colin passed away. And it really hit me hard. And for a long time, I didn't deal with it emotionally. And I felt like, I just had to keep pushing for him. And so then I'm still doing these consultations. I decided that I wanted to start a foundation and start speaking more. And so in January of 2021, I start the Live Life Bigger Foundation. And things are just picking up. Obviously, his family was grieving, and I get to this point in the summer where his wife was ready for me to come and get the footage for the workshop. And so I come and get the footage, and I thought I'd lost it. And so for so long I was working so hard, and I was just pushing. So, cause I was like, if I can get this workshop out, and if I can keep doing what I'm doing, I'll make Colin proud. And like, it'll all have been okay because I can help carry the torch. And so all of that, those emotions. And then I thought I had lost the footage, and I just have like a complete burnout.
Sure.
And that was really hard. That was really hard because I hadn't given myself time to grieve his death and to mourn. And so I think that after that point, I kind of hit a bump in the road, and got my neighbor involved who does IT work, and we were able to recover the footage and stuff like that.
Thank goodness, right?
Yeah. But now I travel across the country and speak to schools and youth groups and talk about the harmful effects of social media and pornography, and talk about mental health and depression, anxiety, suicide. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
And so it's been amazing. It's been so cool. I've worked with on legislature in Salt Lake at the Capitol, House Bill 72. I worked on that with Representative Pulsifer and some other amazing people there. And I've been able to travel a lot. I'm speaking 35 times in the next 60 days while doing high school. So it's a crazy schedule.
That's awesome.
But yeah, being able to kind of turn everything around and help inspire people and just save the one. And that's what I always think about. In fact, I told you yesterday I was in Cedar City, so I went down Tuesday night, did a presentation Tuesday night, and then 2 presentations at the high school, 2 at the middle school, and a community night.
Dang.
And after...
That'll wear you out.
Yeah. Definitely. I had 2 energy drinks that day. And so after one of the high school presentations, the girl the other cool thing is that a lot of my presentations are student driven. Most people who go out and speak, it's like parent driven a lot, especially at schools. But a lot of these kids like are involved and they're interested and they want to bring change to their community. And so I have like students like 16, 17, 18-year-old kids reaching out, and they're organizing these massive assemblies and these community nights. And this girl that had organized it, she comes and talks to me after the first assembly, and she was like, I just talked to a girl who I've known since the beginning of the year, and she's tried to attempt suicide previously, and she had a plan for this upcoming Saturday, but today she decided that her life was worth living. And it was just that moment, and it's moments like those that everything's worth it. All the money, all the resources, all the hard work, all the going to bed at 1 a.m. every single morning because I have to do homework and I have to do all of this stuff, and continue to grow this thing. Like all of it just instantaneously becomes worth it. And there's no value that you can put on that. And it doesn't matter the amount of like disruptive kids in the assembly. Like nothing else matters at that point because one person decided that they're going to live.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more, man. If we can reach one person, I really think you sharing today is going to save someone's life, honestly.
I mean,
I really do.
And I honestly believe for those of you listening, this is directed towards you, not anyone else. Your life is too precious to waste. And there is a life that is waiting for you. There's untapped potential that is waiting for you to go and grasp it. And that looks different for every single person. You can't compare your potential to anyone else's because the maximum amount that I can do is going to be different than the maximum amount that Todd can do.
Right.
Those potentials are different, but there is a life waiting for you that will be beyond your wildest dreams. And not only will you find joy in that, but you'll be able to find sadness. And I think that's what's amazing because you can't have joy without sadness. Yeah. And in fact, I saw this thing the other day and it was like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but I need to feel. Like we need all of the emotions.
Right.
And I talked about that. Like for 5 years, I didn't feel anything. And I wish I could have just felt sadness, but I didn't. I just felt nothing.
Yeah, right.
And like there is a life waiting for you listeners, and that life is worth living for, and that life is worth all of the hard work. I don't regret anything in the past 4 years. That I don't have a single regret, and that is because like I've been willing to put in the hard work. I've been willing to do everything that I need to do to chase that life.
Yeah.
And I know that everyone can find that. Everyone can find that for themselves.
Beautifully said, Smith. Seriously, that is so beautifully said. I think a lot of people don't realize that, but I do believe that we are here to go through tough times, to overcome it so we can be in a position to help other people. That's exactly what you're doing, and you're giving back now. And look, I mean, I can just feel your passion, dude. You're 18. It blows my mind.
Thank you.
That this is where your head is at this age. You probably hear that a lot, but I mean, I can only imagine, like, if you're starting this young, like, think about, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to be a kid forever. So
yeah, I know. Me too.
Yeah, I love that. And, one thing that I want to just mention too.
Yeah, please.
Like what you said. So there's this idea, the hero's journey cycle, right? Uh-huh. And basically the ideal and a good story is when someone goes through trials and because of that overcomes them and receives what they wanted, right? Yep. And a bad story is one of two things, where someone doesn't go through trials and receives what they want, or someone goes through trials and then doesn't get what they want.
Yeah.
And the reason why there's these movies and these books that we love is because we see ourselves in it.
Yeah.
When we watch Harry Potter, yes, there's wizards and witches and dragons and all of this unrealistic and fictionist stuff.
Yeah.
But we see ourselves in those characters. And there's this idea, the word evangelium was a early Catholic word that the Catholic priests use basically just to confuse the peasants. but I think it was J.R. Tolkien. He created this new definition, but it can't even be described with words. But it's that moment when everything is worth it. It's that moment, in the Lord of the Rings when the 7 armies charge each other, and it's just the glorious turning point, right? It's that moment in the 7th Harry Potter when they defeat Voldemort and Harry throws the wand off the bridge, and that's the beginning of the new life.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that we watch these movies and they all end at that point, right? But we all know that's when the story begins. And so I think a lot of the times, like, we watch this and we see and we feel ourselves in these movies, but what we don't realize is that you're probably at the point right now where the movie ends. And for that story, that's just the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. So well said. Are you a guy that loves to study and research? And you know a lot.
Yeah, I like to read. I just like to be knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And again, I try to live a life where I can think a lot. And one of my favorite things, and actually the only New Year's resolution that I ever set down, is that I want to be able to spend 30 minutes with myself every day with no distractions, nothing near me. Mm-hmm. And I want to be able to sit there and I want to be able to think and be okay with my thoughts. And so I've always I don't like distracting myself. If I'm bored, I love to be bored because now I'm going to think about life and all of this crazy stuff. But I also like to read, and I like to hear things that are profound. And so I chase after that stuff.
No, I can tell. You're very well spoken. So one of the questions I have going through my mind is, now that you're here, how do you handle your social media? And, what are maybe some tips that you could even share with our listeners? Like, what do you do to make sure you kind of keep it in check? How much time do you spend? What do you try to do to kind of set up these, boundaries that you will follow?
Right. Yeah. So for, especially during the beginning stages of, starting this company and the foundation, I wasn't ready to handle all of that stuff. So we actually found a lady who's really good at social media, and she kind of took control of it. I'd write content and send her pictures, and she'd post it and respond to people. Yeah. And all through that time, I was working on myself because I want to be able to control it. I want to be able to have the self-control, and I had to work on that. And now I'm at a point where I've realized that technology, social media, all of this stuff is merely just a tool. And, there's two people in the world, and there's the entertainer and the entertainee. And I want to be an entertainer, Mm-hmm. I don't want to be somebody that's sitting there scrolling. And I want to be able to use these things, again, as a way to spread light and as a way to help people. Because they aren't social media, technology, that stuff, it's not a foundation of my life. It's just a tool. It's a tool to connect with people, to reach more people. And so I really had to have that mindset. And now that that's kind of just ingrained in me, it's like, I don't even want to sit on Instagram and scroll. I'd rather be spending time with my sister. I'd rather be working on my business, bettering myself. Yeah. And I think as I've been able to taste a little more of the things that I love and find some more success, that just grows and grows, where I don't want to waste my time. Yeah. And I've realized that this life is so short. The last 3 to 4 years have just flown by. Yeah. And it scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, wait till you get my age, dude. Yeah. It really flies. Yeah.
And I don't want to waste a single second.
Yeah, I love it.
So, I think
and to have that perspective at 18 is rare. Do you understand that?
Yeah,
it is so rare.
Yeah, and that's why that's why I try to share this stuff, because I know that my generation, if we all thought like this, if we all thought as of technology and all of these things as a tool, if we all understood our potential, we already are going to be the ones that change the world, but it's either for good or for bad. Mm-hmm. And right now it's looking towards the bad. Yeah. But if we can understand that all of these things are just a tool to be used for good, then I think that's what's going to be able to change the world. So that's why I want to spread my message. That's why I want to be able to stand in front of thousands of kids and inspire them, because it's not me. It's not a single person who can change the world. It has to be everybody. So.
Well, I love it. So I want to ask you this. If there's someone listening to you right now, in particular a younger kid who is spending, I mean, the clients I deal with who are struggling in high school and junior high, I have them always look up, what's your screen time?
Mm-hmm.
And it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
7 hours, 8 hours, 6.5 hours. What would you say to that kid who is feeling depressed, is down and low? They're spending hours and hours locked into this social media addiction. I mean, it really is an addiction. What would you tell them, and what would they do to start breaking out of that? What's some advice that you could give them?
Yeah, so the average kid from 12 to 17 spends 9 hours a day on technology, on screens, and that's without schoolwork. And so
9 hours.
Yeah, realizing that and understanding that, if you are a young listener, if you know, the first thing that I'd push you to do is log off long enough to fall on your butt, and log off long enough to fail. Because when you fail, you realize that, like, failing isn't that bad. And I think a lot of kids are just scared to fail, and they're scared to make a mistake. But that's how you learn, and that's how you become better.
Yeah.
And so first, know that, like, you're capable of a lot of things. You're capable of not only failing, but standing up after a fail, and then achieving the goal that you wanted. And so I'd push you, like, do that and figure out for yourself who you are, and figure out for yourself what you can do. Because, and especially with parents today, I think this is my biggest problem with parents today, is that they're not willing to let their kids fail. And they're not willing, you know, parents push on what they think of as, you know, if my kids will do this, they'll become successful.
Right.
And it's all out of good intention, because they just want their kids to be successful, to have a happy life. But what we need to do is encourage them to fail. And so go out, fall on your butt a few times, pick yourself back up, and through that, you'll realize what you can become. Okay. And then use all the things that we've been given. Use your natural knack for technology and for social media. Use that for good, because that can be used as a tool. Figure out what you're passionate about and go and get it. Find people who can help you. Find people who need your help, and be willing to serve those people. Be willing to do the hard work. Life's not easy. Nothing that was worth working for was easy. Yeah. And so I think when you can realize that, when you can understand, like, no matter what situation you're in right now, there's something more waiting for you.
I love it. Very well said. Great advice. What's a challenge you could give all our listeners right now? I know you've given some stuff already, but give us a challenge. Like, for all of us, including myself, on social media, what's a challenge that we could all maybe take on? What would you give us?
Yeah, I mean, for social media, I'd challenge you to go and look through the people that you follow and ask yourself, does this person lift me up? Does this person better me? So for me, you know, I have almost 2,500 followers on Instagram. I only follow 120 people. And for me, like, that just not only limits the time that I spend, but the only people that I follow are my family. And I follow people that I use their stuff, and I repost their content. And so go on and ask yourself, does this person make me happy? And if they don't, unfollow them. Yeah. If you find yourself being like, oh, why does this person post this? Unfollow that person. Remove the toxicity from social media so that you can create an uplifting place to be. Because for me, like, the time that I do spend on my Instagram, it's all uplifting. It's all people talking about addiction recovery and mental health awareness and all this stuff. It's a good place to be for me. Of course, I still don't like spending a lot of time on it, but it is a fairly...
But when you're there, you want to make sure it's uplifting.
Yeah, and so go and, like, just weed out your the people that you follow. The other thing that I challenge you outside of social media to do is ask yourself, where do you want to be in 20 years? And when you ask that, and this is called back planning, and I love doing this, you figure out through that what you need to do every single day. And every single time, if you ask yourself that question, it won't be spending a lot of time on social media.
Right.
Like you won't be like, okay, if I can spend 3 hours on social media every single day, I can achieve my dream. So ask yourself those kinds of questions, and then be willing to take those little steps every single day to get to where you want to be in the future.
Wow. Love it. And I think that's great advice. You know, I had a friend who was going through all of her followers, or who she was following, doing what you just said. I don't even know this person. I don't even know why I follow them. I'm going to unfollow. Right. You know, again, like cleaning it up. And I love that. I love that advice. Well, man, you've said so amazing things today. If someone wants to use your services and they want to know about your foundation and this and that, what's the best way to do that? And what's the website and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so you can follow me on social. My nonprofit social is at live.life.bigger. We also have a Facebook page at Live Life Bigger Foundation. And then our website is www.livelifebigger.org. As far as my company goes, our company tag on Instagram is at ProtectStrong, and it's PROTECHT STRONG, Protect Strong, because we're pro tech as well as protecting the home. So there's that, and then you can find us at www.protectstrong.com, spelled the same way.
I love it. It's amazing. Dude, folks, he's 18. You hearing this? I mean, the guy's so well-spoken. I mean, I'm sitting here going, who am I? I'm impressed, dude. I really am. You. And again, I'm so grateful that people have reached out to me saying, dude, you got to have Smith on your Belief Cast. And I'm so grateful that I listened to him.
I am too.
You know, I really am. And I just love what you're doing. I love the way you carry yourself. I think what you're doing is probably the single most needed thing right now, especially for our young people.
Thank you.
I really do. And I think that's why you're blowing up. And I do believe Colin is very proud of you right now,
Thank
dude.
You. That means a lot.
You know, and rest in peace, Colin. Mm-hmm. Props to him. I really admired him too with what he was doing, and to see you kind of again picking up the torch, so to speak.
Thank you.
And doing what you're doing. I just think it's so needed, and no wonder you're so busy, and everyone wants to have a piece of Smith Alley, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking some time today and share your story with us. I hope people will reach out to you. I think they will. This is going to hit a lot of people. And there's a lot of moms that are listening to this right now. Moms, listen to this. Go follow Smith Alley. Sit down with your family. Start coming up with some guidelines around social media. If you need help, reach out to Smith and use his services. Yeah. Have him come into your home. Yeah. You know, whether it's virtually or if he actually does it in person. Mm-hmm. But use his services and get some guidelines and some help.
Well, yeah, and
right.
Well, yeah, one thing that I just want to touch on that.
Please.
We talk a lot about proactive parenting, and a lot of parents are like, "Oh, we don't need this. That's not for us. Like, we love what you're doing, but we don't need that."
Yeah, it's great,
right now.
But
yeah, what I want to tell you is that this is not an if. This is a when problem. Yeah. And most likely it is a now problem. Most likely, if you have kids, the average exposure for pornography nowadays can be seen as young as 7 years old. That's the lowest study that I've read.
That's
So
mind-blowing.
if you have a kid who's 7 years or older, it's probably a now problem. Be proactive about it. Be willing to say, okay, this is probably my kid that's struggling with this. And when you can put in those safety precautions and those things before, you can save a lot of heartbreak. You can save a lot of resources and all of these things. So, be proactive, be willing to reach out. If you want to reach out and just ask what you need to do to have a safer home and a more digitally healthy home, I love to help anybody that I can. And then lastly, I again, like towards the young listeners, because I think the power's in your hands. Like, I just want to let everybody know that you are enough. And if you can't find something beautiful about yourself, get a better mirror and look a little closer and stare a little longer. Yeah. Wow. So well said, my friend. And you really do inspire me. And I know I can be better in those areas too. I'll be honest with you. And so I thank you for inspiring me. I'm over here taking mental notes. I've been written down notes like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And so I'm so grateful we have you. And that you're so passionate about helping other people. And I think that's the other message too, is it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, dude, you started
really kind of doing this at 16, 17, and here you are 18 doing all this amazing stuff. I can't wait to see where you're going with this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks, man. Smith Alley. What a cool name, but what a cool person, and what a great person. Please reach out to him. Check out his stuff. Go to his website. I'll have all that in the show notes, so you'll be able to link to it. But please reach out to him. And again, if, like he said, it's a now problem. No one. And what stood out to me, one of the things he said is, you don't give your kid an iPad going, well, I hope they get an eating disorder. I hope they get a pornography addiction. They don't think of it that way, but man, it is an issue and it needs to be addressed. So Smith, keep inspiring everybody. Keep doing what you're doing. Anything I can do to help you further this cause. Obviously I have you on today, but if I can do anything in the future for you,
thank you.
I'd be honored to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. I love you guys. And please share this with anyone that you can. Subscribe, do a review. That would be really helpful. Love you guys. Till next time.